The Sherlock Holmes Advent Calendar. The Redeemer's Coming, by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Nora Godwin. Narrated by Peter Silverleaf. 3. In the Convent. When I regained consciousness, it was dark all around me, but the freezing cold had given way to a pleasant, comfortable warmth. I was still lying on my back, but now apparently on a comparatively soft, almost cuddly underlay, wrapped in a soft down blanket. Then a white light approached, slowly and fluctuating. In its outlines it looked like a close and very familiar person. Immediately I remembered the description of similar situations that people with near-death experiences told. A second figure stepped in, approached, and eventually bent over me. In a soft voice they demanded, "Come, John, come," and reached out to me. I knew that if I took their hand I would cross the border to the hereafter, but I did not feel fear. On the contrary, I felt as if I was levitating, invigorating new strength. I rubbed my eyes and straightened up, and there I saw the face that had spoken to me. It was Holmes. The next moment, Inspector Lestrade stepped next to him, holding a candle and impatiently asking, "What's next? Is he finally awake?" At that point, I understood what was going on. By no means was I on my way to the afterlife. Instead, I was lying in a hospital bed. Apparently, we had escaped our cold, airless grave in time. Nevertheless, I was still confused. "What happened? I'm not dead at all," I asked in a hoarse voice. "Sorry that I have to disappoint you, old friend," Holmes said, smiling. "But what happened? Where am I?" I continued. Certainly I did not make a sharp impression. "We are in the Redeemer's Abbey in Twickenham," Holmes said. "When our arrival was delayed, the Abbot sent a search squad. Not far from here they discovered our horses, who were apparently able to free themselves from the snow masses, and after that they found the site of the accident. The carriage was dug up, our unconscious bodies were recovered and brought here. The friars saved us, well, not all of us. Unfortunately, it was too late for the coachman. He suffocated in the avalanche." And then I saw that Inspector Lestrade was wearing a thick head bandage, and that Holmes had to lean on a wooden crutch on one side. I looked down at myself, felt my body, but I didn't seem to miss anything else. So I grabbed Holmes' still outstretched hand, and he pulled me up. "Thank you," I said as I stood next to the bed. "Thank God," Inspector Lestrade said. "Or the Abbot," Holmes said. "In the end he rescued us, and he was just in time." Be that as it may, we had happily escaped our gruesome fate. The inspector had brought my clothes, which were still warm. Apparently they had been dried by the fireplace in another room. As I dressed, Holmes limped to the barred window and looked out. Meanwhile, a real snowstorm had set in, and the snowflakes were shooed in all directions by the strong winds. "It seems," Holmes muttered thoughtfully, "that we will be stuck here." "That doesn't matter for the time being," Inspector Lestrade replied. "We're here to investigate, and we should get started. The fact that this building offers us reliable protection against the weather can only be good for us. After all, we are safe here." Holmes turned to us and shook his head. "On the contrary," he told Inspector Lestrade, "you forget, dear colleague, that within these walls a murderer is doing his mischief. As long as we don't get hold of him, no one in the convent is safe." Holmes was right, of course, although I had tried to push this idea aside until now. To me, that was enough to understand the importance of us solving this case as soon as possible. "Well then," I exclaimed, deceitful, "then let's wait for the Abbot. Is he ready for a questioning?" "He's waiting on us," Holmes said. "If you're ready, Watson, we can get on with it right away." I nodded in agreement, and Holmes went ahead, as he already knew the way to the premises of the head of the order. It was a moderately illuminated walk through the old walls of this convent, which led to the executive office space, if you can call them that. Arriving at the door, Holmes knocked twice, and we stepped in. The Abbot smiled kindly at us, immediately rose from his chair and came to meet us. He was dressed in a simple brown cowl, as is customary with the Franciscans, Around the waist a white knit with 3 knots. His pointed hood, which was resting on his shoulders, exposed a head with shaggy white hair and a friendly face with a well-groomed and trimmed, but also fading, full beard. The abbot was certainly over 60 years old. While walking, he leaned on a wooden stick with a pentagonal knob of metal. "Gentlemen," he said, "welcome to the ministry." Then he addressed me directly. "Dr. Watson, I'm glad to see that you're back on your feet. How do you feel?" "Thank you, Your Grace," I replied. "I'm fine. Hi, Grace." The abbot, with a good-natured face, slightly tilted his head and declared, "Please, spare the formalities. This is not what the Franciscan order is about. My official title is Guardian, but just call me Brother Francis. Here, in this order, we are all equal. We deliberately want to maintain a flat hierarchy." "I understand," I said as I looked around the room. It was modestly furnished, 2 simple desks with chairs, a small table with water jugs and bowls, on the wall just a simple wooden cross without any ornament. "Just take a seat, gentlemen," the abbot continued, offering us the visitors' chairs as he disappeared behind his desk, which was minimally larger than the other. "Can I offer you a glass of water?" Holmes denied. "Thank you, Brother Francis," he said. "We want to get straight to the point. In the end, the Cardinal wishes for a speedy solution to the case." We sat down, but Holmes looked a little awkward trying. "How is your leg going?" the abbot asked, when he became aware of it. "Better," Holmes replied. "Please give my thanks to the treating brother. The leg was professionally splinted during my unconsciousness, and the quickly designed crutch stabilizes my walk superbly." Once again the abbot began to smile. "That was my doing," he said. "You need to know, in addition to theology, I also studied medicine." I was somewhat surprised to find a colleague in a Catholic monastery, but I didn't let on to anything, while Holmes succinctly stated, "Remarkable," which the abbot again acknowledged with a friendly nod of his head. "Well," Inspector Lestrade said, "I, for my part, have a severe headache, just in case anyone is interested. In this respect, I would like to quickly end this investigation. What can you tell us about the murder of Brother Emanuel?" "It's a deeply sad story," the abbot began slowly. "Only a few months ago, Brother Emanuel found his way to God, and now he had to go to the kingdom of heaven. May his soul find the peace that it had begun to seek here with us." "How did the young Mr. Taylor join you as a novice?" asked Holmes. "It was actually a little unusual," said the abbot. "He was baptized here and expressed a desire to stay with us. He probably had no relatives with whom he was in contact. Apparently he was an orphan. At least that's what he told us, and of course we don't do any investigations." "Of course," Holmes replied. "That's certainly our job. And did he put himself in the convent?" "Brother Emanuel was a devout man," replied the abbot. "Modest, pleasing to God, diligent, reliable, and energetic. A brother as one could wish for. He was the first to get up in the morning and the last to go to bed in the evening. He was a kitchen assistant, carpenter, gardener, and assistant to the librarian. A joy for everyone, especially for the Lord. We all appreciated Brother Emanuel." "With one exception," I immediately thought to myself, but I forbid myself from throwing it in. "I don't think there were any conflicts within the monastery," suggested Holmes instead. The abbot shook his head. "Our community is based on restraint, respect, and fraternalism," he said with a soft tone. "There is certainly no room for controversy here. In any case, I would not be aware of anything like this." "What a blessing," Holmes attested, immediately adding his next question, "How many friars belong to this happy community?" "We are 28 brothers here in the convent," the abbot claimed, and immediately corrected with a sigh, "Well, after the recent events, only 27. "And one of those 27 brothers found the body?" asked Holmes. Brother Francis looked at the ceiling of the room and then said, "In fact, that was poor Brother Peter, our vicar and economist, my deputy, so to speak. When Brother Emanuel did not show up for morning prayer yesterday, which was extremely uncharacteristic, he set out to search. We thought that he was sick at first, but after not finding him in his room, Brother Peter went to the outhouse, and there he discovered the body. Then he immediately informed me, and I sent for the police. It seems that our convent is currently not exactly a joyful place. However, the Lord likes to put us through severe trials." Holmes raised his right eyebrow and asked, "What do you mean?" "It's not only the loss we have to mourn," replied the abbot. "Just a few weeks before Brother Francis's entry, we lost our housekeeper, poor Miss Mary. Well, at least that was the name we gave her. She never told us her real name." Once again I was astonished, because why would a mendicant order employ a domestic helper? But Holmes was faster again and asked, "You had a housekeeper," he said, looking inquiringly, "and she died as well?" "Only God knows what happened to Miss Mary," replied the abbot. "She simply disappeared without a trace from one day to the next. Anyways, you are right, it was highly unusual to have her here. But during our pastoral work we got to know the young girl. She was homeless, without any means or connections, at the mercy of starvation or a miserable life in shame. God must have brought her to us, so we took her in. That was a year ago." "A tragic story," Inspector Lestrade interjected, "but we should stick to our murder case. Are you aware, Brother Francis, that the murderer must still be here in these walls? This convent is like a fortress. The killer cannot possibly have gained access from outside." The abbot paused for a minute, but then replied, "That's true, Inspector, and there is no way around it. But I am not afraid. I am convinced that remorse will overwhelm the perpetrator, and that he will soon turn himself in. It's in God's hands." "And if he doesn't?" asked Inspector Lestrade. "Then it's in our hands," Holmes said. "Well, I think that would be all we need to know for now. Thank you for your time and patience, Brother Francis, and again for our rescue from the avalanche." "You are welcome," replied the abbot. "I will let Brother Peter come. He will give you a suitable accommodation. Otherwise, the convent is at your disposal. You are free to investigate. You can also contact me at any time, but I would ask you to take into account religious life and its sacred rules as much as possible." "Of course," Holmes said, standing up. "Nevertheless, we will not be able to avoid treating at least one fellow friar with kid gloves, for one of the 27 friars is a murderer, and we will undoubtedly find Cain, convict them, and hand them over to worldly jurisdiction. The heavenly judgment of God will await him later." "Indeed," replied the abbot, folding his hands.